Welcome back. You are listening to Synth Work, and this is where I left things off at the end of episode 0 of the dry synth test sessions, where I tested this synth plugin, the 11FM1Z. I did not anticipate that I would be right back with a follow-up video on this synth plugin, but as it turned out in the session, it does something pretty weird, and I had to jump back in to find out what exactly that is. When I started the recording, I intentionally went in almost completely blind. As far as I remember, I had never used the 11FM1Z before. The only thing that I did before the video was that I checked if it works at all. So before the video, I loaded it up once, connected it to the master, and then went to the pattern view to look for the note input. The note input column is the only one that has 3 dots. And you can also see down in the status bar that it says note when I click on it. I intentionally did not look at any of the other parameters here, so I did not really know what this synth was going to do, only that the C4 that I entered sounds like this. Since I could guess from the name that it's an FM synthesizer, I thought it might be good at generating some kind of bell sound. So my plan was to play a simple C major chime that goes C, E, G, C. And that's what I entered. I immediately noticed that there was something funny about the octave, but at the same time I kind of brushed it off and continued on with the pattern, because I guess I must have assumed that it has something to do with frequency modulation and that there is some second oscillator hiding in these patterns that is somehow interacting with the octave in a funny way that causes a weirdly shifted resultant frequency. And I hoped that I could remedy it by playing around with the parameters over the course of the session. But that's not what's going on at all with this synthesizer, and I couldn't quite wrap my mind around it. It was only after I played back the recording and then went back in that I slowly started to see what's actually going on. It's unusual, but in some ways quite simple. The distance between C4 and C5 isn't an octave at all. This synth has a non-octave tuning. But even for a non-octave tuning, it is quite weird because it's otherwise standard 12-tone equal temperament, just with a step at the octave. Usually when non-octave tuning comes up, it's for non-standard tunings, or it has something to do with physical modeling. Some real instruments, such as pianos, do have very slightly padded octaves, and wind instruments may have register shifts at other points. But none of that applies here. And it's really quite perplexing to me to hear this kind of combination. If I play the C major scale, the intervals between the notes are all perfect tones and semitones in 12-tone equal temperament. But then if I go from B to C in the next octave, it sounds like this. It should be a semitone, but instead it is a perfect fourth. The first thing that actually clued me in that there was something going on with the tuning of the notes was the fact that there is a Hertz frequency value displayed next to the note name down in the status bar. This is not normal. And to my defense, when I first entered the notes, these Hertz values and note names were not visible at all. They only show up when you click on the notes that you have already entered. But thankfully I had these Hertz values right at hand when I went ahead to determine what this synth is actually tuned to. The easiest way to compare something with standard tuning is to look for an A. As you might know, the standard Western concert pitch is A4 equals 440 Hz. The octave below is exactly half that value, and the octave above is exactly double that value, at least in standard tuning, that is. So A4 is 440 Hz, A3 is 220 Hz, A2 is 110 Hz, A1 is 55 Hz, and A0 is 27.5 Hz. Let's start down here. If I enter the note A0 in the synth, it will sound like this. The frequency is 29.1 Hz, which is actually not very far off from A0, but it is exactly one semitone off. If I go down to G sharp 0, it sounds as A0, with a pitch of 27.5 Hz. G0 is at the pitch of G sharp, F sharp is at the pitch of G, and so on. The lowest note you can enter is C0, which is sounding C sharp 0. Although you can't actually hear that anymore because it's too low and there aren't any audible overtones. To map out the next octave, I looked for the note that produces the frequency of the next A at 55 Hz. And that's E1. E1 sounds as A1. Which also means that C1 sounds as F1. In the second octave we don't have to look very far, because C2 sounds as A2. Now if we jump one octave higher on the input, it will result in a jump of one octave and a major third on the output. So C3 does not sound as A3, but it goes up an additional major third to C sharp 4. And this is where the pattern repeats. A 3-octave span on the input side results in a 4-octave span on the output side. At the end of each octave there are 4 semitones missing that can't be played on this synth. A3, for example, with the frequency of 220 Hz is not available. Now that we know what's going on, let's fill out the tuning chart. We get the sounding pitch of A4, 440 Hz at G sharp 3. Same as in the 0 octave, but now with 1 octave of difference. In the 4th octave, the pattern of the 1st octave repeats. C4 sounds as F5, and E4 sounds as A5. C5 sounds as A6. A7, like A3, is not possible. Going on to what's already extreme treble at this point, C6 sounds as C sharp 8. G sharp 6 sounds as A8. C7 sounds as F9, and E7 sounds as A9. And then it just keeps on going. C8 sounds as A10. C9 sounds as C sharp 12. G sharp 9 sounds as A12. And B9 sounds as C13. C13 is an absolutely ridiculous pitch of 133,952.3 Hz. This is way above the theoretical limit for rendering a waveform on this synth, since it is tied to a sample rate of 44.1 kHz. Fun fact, if you raise the sample rate, the pitch of this synth will go even higher. A cleanly rendered wave at 20,000 Hz should be absolutely inaudible, and in practice it would be, but the extreme high range of this synth is in part audible. For some reason there is something going on with both F8 and F9, even though there shouldn't be an octave repetition in this synth. I still haven't looked into exactly what is going on here and what makes these notes audible, but I guess this is an interesting special application of the synth. I would guess that there is some kind of LFO effect going on, and the higher frequencies wrap around into the audible spectrum. I will probably analyze that for myself when I look at the recording of this video. Maybe I will cover this synth again in another video in the future when I do another session, or maybe something more prepared where I take into account what I've already learned. And I'm surely gonna wrap out the tuning chart next time. As for the reason why this tuning was chosen, I can only speculate that the synth was maybe supposed to be used to just generate bleepy sounds that are intentionally out of harmony with everything else. But I don't think that I'm going to use it exclusively for that purpose. Before I sign off, let me play you some more of these super high notes, even if they give me a little bit of vertigo, like it's somehow dangerous up there. Maybe it's just a psychological effect, but the C13 that you're going to hear at the end somehow seems seriously overclocked to me, and that's kind of an achievement in and of itself. So please enjoy this sonic shower, make sure that there are no dogs next to the speakers, and I'm going to see you next week. Thank you for watching. Have a nice weekend.